Well, it seems now that this is up and running, and I have no idea how this is working. It's purely me trying to figure this out tonight, primarily. Got a few things that I'm going to take a look at and do. Should people start showing up? Um, question is, how can I tell people are showing up? Uh, this being the $64,000 question. Um, so, um, right. Okay, so I ended up. Okay, okay, uh, okay. My apologies to anybody who's watching, trying to figure out what's going on here. It's me trying to figure out how to do all of this. So, presuming nobody's watching yet, because it's not even 7:15. Um, so, just trying to figure out how this is working and making sure that I'm doing it right, so that I don't. That's the goal here tonight is just to figure out how to do it. Okay. All right. So, I think at the moment there is nobody watching, or if there is, let me know. And I'll just sort of fiddle around here with stuff until I see if there's anybody watching or not, and just see how this goes. So part of it I was trying to figure out was just sort of the viewing of stuff. So I'm just going to see how this goes. I found this is part of a longer home video from 1947 tourists coming up from the San Francisco area. So this is crossing Lionsgate Bridge. And there are people watching. Thank you, whoever's watching. As I'm saying, I'm only trying to figure this out, trying to see what I can do with this. I have certain goals with the channel where I want to go with stuff. Life got in the way. So for the last sort of 5 years, I really haven't been able to do the work on this that I wanted. First, I had the died. Then the whole COVID thing messed everything up, and then post-COVID, I had my own health thing, and so I ended up not being able to do all the work that I wanted to do on videos, uh, and ending up with having to sort of put this aside for a lot longer than I ever planned. But I'm now back to it, and I'm happy to be back to it. And um, my goal is ultimately, uh, I want to try and there's the stories of British Columbia that I want to tell and that need to be told because our province, nobody knows these stories. And I wanted to, about 5 years ago, start creating original content. And problem was, my computer died. Couldn't render videos, and this generally died. so it really was an option. And so that sort of screwed things up. My primary laptop is not one that I can run the video software on, but shortly I'm buying a new desktop now that I can scrape the money together to do it, and that should be able to allow me to do um, the original videos. So you're saying, but what sort of original videos? Well, one of the first ones I really want to do is one about Nancy Hodges, which is somebody that should be known in this province. Nancy Hodges was one of the top political leaders this province has ever had, but she was a woman before her time. She was a evangelizing newspaper editor in the interior. She became an MLA and for the Liberals, and then then with the coalition, she was part of the coalition government in 1940 and served as part of it. And she seemed to hold a lot more sway than one would expect within it. The whole story, there's a lot more details, but a few tidbits about her is 1945, she convinced all the women MLAs to get together and saying, we as a province should be collecting the works of Emily Carr. She's an important artist. We should have her works. And she's the reason why we have a collection at all. And one of the male MLAs, and the details are somewhere, and I don't have them on me, said, why would we collect their works? Her works. She's a woman. She can't be an artist. Nancy Hodges also believed in the UN as a concept so much that on her own dime, in the summer of 1945, she traveled to San Francisco to be at the opening sessions of the UN. And she was also the first female speaker of any parliamentary body that I can find, as in national or subnational. That was in 1952. And it was a long time before there was any more anywhere else. And she finally ended up becoming senator from British Columbia, and the last senator to come from actual Vancouver Island, because her home place was Victoria then. So she's definitely somebody I want to do a story on. There's also then the 1930s. We had all these forced labor camps in British Columbia, labor camps for uh, for unemployed men, and so they were if you were an unemployed man, you could be picked up and you could be sent to a labor camp, and there's I believe about 200 of them. It's an interesting story. The rest of the country had a few, but nothing on the scale that British Columbia did. And these men were paid effectively nothing, given awful food, bad living conditions, and then expected to do things like build highways by hand, even though there's machinery. A number of them eventually in 1935 went on to Ottawa Trek to protest these things. A number of them went to Spain then to fight in behalf of the government against the fascists of the military there. Definitely very communist, these people, but they actually was an interesting group, and these labor camps are a story that we really don't know a lot about. Conveniently, these camps were perfectly available if you needed to suddenly put another mass population into them. So it's one of the reasons why the internment of Japanese was so easy to do in British Columbia, is because the government already had the camps sitting around from when they were forced labor camps for unemployed men. Uh, I also want to talk about something about the McLean Gang, our own group of outlaws, basically teenagers on a tear, causing trouble and getting into shootouts with the law, and ending up being hanged. But they were our own outlaws from sort of the Cache Creek area, from what, the 1870s, 1880s. And I don't have the details of all these things. I want to talk about BC's short-lived navy. August 1914, British Columbia ended up owning uh, two submarines, and it's a fascinating, crazy story. And when I film that one, I'm actually going to film it, including some of the locations of what happened with it. But it's a crazy story. Um, okay, then uh, British Columbia, we the worst natural disaster for killing people um, happened here in British Columbia. A town of several thousand people was covered in a volcanic eruption, basically killing almost everybody. This was this was not it, this was a bit more than 300 years ago. And there's a whole reasons why you've never heard about it. And ultimately, it's a very colonialist idea because it was an Aboriginal town that was covered in lava, so therefore apparently doesn't count as Canadian history. 1948. Oh, the strike in the woods. We had this incredible strike in 1948. The IWA against the forest industry that basically shut down much of the industry in this province. It's a fascinating story. Then another one is in 1933, Fraser Mills, which is now part of Coquitlam, was a separate municipality then, had the largest sawmill in the world. Well, the owners were making money, even though it was the depths of the Depression, but they decided our workforce, it's a bunch of Chinese, a bunch of Japanese, a bunch of Hindus, as they would call them, a bunch of Francophones, some Greeks, and then a few English types. They'll never work together. We'll just divide them, and then they will agree all to go back, accept their wages, and go okay, whatever. So they were offering a pay cut to them to keep their jobs. Instead, they went on strike. The company ended up using the police with 50 caliber machine guns to close the sawmill, and eventually the strike was won. During the depths of the depression, the various communities of people got together and realized that they're better unified than separate. So it's a fascinating story. I'll just change the picture. Oh, one of Greater Victoria, a map from 1861, part of the Gorge neighborhood where I used to live. Anyway, it's a fascinating story, and there's because there was a court case related to it. There's incredible transcripts that can be gone through that. I also want to do something about Axel Wenner Gren, the Swedish Nazi-friendly industrialist who would promise the universe and everything and completely beguiled and enchanted W.A.C. Bennett with visions of sugar plums dancing. Well, no, visions of bigger dams than you could possibly imagine, bigger than what we have. And in the 1950s, basically giving me a song and dance that he would build everything and anything. And so he was just like, W.C. Bennett was like totally, total bromance and totally. And the man was and not exactly a, well, we can tell the story later on in it. Um, Also want to talk about that for two elections in British Columbia, provincially, we used a much fairer voting system that actually reflected public will. Not as good as it could be, but certainly much better than we do now. That'd be a good one. The Beaver. Of course, I got to talk about the Beaver. SS Beaver, and people don't understand. It looks like some old steamship and that. But when it was launched um, in London in 1834, it was cutting edge technology globally. It was so cutting edge that the docks were filled with tens of thousands of people to watch the launch of this amazing wonder. The king himself showed up. Hudson's Bay Company had commissioned it, and they didn't use it in Europe. They sailed it around Cape Horn and all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, where they then used it here for their fur trading business. Meaning that by 1835, the indigenous people on the coast of British Columbia were seeing technology that virtually no Europeans were seeing. And in fact, the Hudson's Bay Company hired indigenous people to work on the Beaver. So we're talking here, the local Salish people, they had much better knowledge of steam engines and steamships and stuff like that than almost anybody in Europe. And we forget about this, that how incredible technology it was, and also how quickly the indigenous people picked it up and how they could see the limitations of it. It's a fascinating story. And the beaver, unfortunately, and the beaver is sort of my son Stephen did a sketch drawing of me, the wreck, and sort of is the logo that I'm using these days. Anyway, was thinking about doing a series on the VCs awarded to people from British Columbia. That could be a bit way down the road. Oh, I'm definitely going to have to do a story about the fruit police and the smugglers in this province, the fruit leggers. There's a it's there's a whole interesting story about the development of the tree fruit industry in the Okanagan, which happens later than you expect. It doesn't even really begin until after the turn of the 19th to 20th century and really barely gets a start before World War One and gets into trouble by the 1930s. So they have a Royal Commission. In the 1940s, they have another Royal Commission. And the 1947 Royal Commission said you should restrict the sale of fruit. So all fruit had to be sold by BC Tree Fruits, and you weren't allowed to sell it otherwise. And so the government actually had BC Tree Fruits had actual police officers that would cause roadblocks to search cars for fruit. Anyway, it's a crazy story. We'll talk about that another time. Uh, I'm about to get to 10,000 subscriptions. I will probably do some sort of, oh my God, I can't believe this. I should have gotten my act together earlier. Anyway, what I'm looking to do is tell the stories of British Columbia, the stories that we aren't seeing, that we aren't hearing, and there's so many of them. And so far, I've really mainly done the found footage because it's a lot easier, but I really want to tell the original stories because we have all these stories. And I keep telling them to people over beers or coffees, and people go, "What do you mean? What? Huh?" Like the number of times I tell stories and people are sort of vaguely shocked. And so I think there's a place for telling these stories. Anyway, this is truly just a test of my live broadcast and whether I can do a live stream and whether it makes any sense at all. This, by the way, is a map, a plan of the original Fort Victoria. This, I don't know if you can see the cursor, because I don't know if I set it to cursor, but there's Fort Street already exists, but where there's now, and they had gardens right on the outside of it. And people don't know that the fort is outlined by bricks in downtown Victoria, and most people don't know about this. Thank you very much, Jackson Peters and Mrs. Peel, um, and um, Zivian 56 and Brad K. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's lots of interesting stories, and we're gonna see. Yeah, it's and I was saying I'm disorganized tonight because I was just mainly trying to. Okay, this is a map that would be used as part of the video about the development of the tree fruit industry in the Okanagan, and also talking about the Okanagan until the railways came in, and even after the railways, it was truly everything was dependent upon the steamships, the sternmillers, because that's how you could get around, because there weren't good roads. So it was the way that things were done. And let's see what else I put up here. As I was saying, this is not organized today. Hopefully, I'll be organized another time. Oh, another ship that I want to do a story on is the Eliza Anderson. The Eliza Anderson, like we always hear about the beaver and then the beaver's relationship to the gold rush and stuff like that. But in many ways, the Eliza Anderson was much more important. The Eliza Anderson moved the law of the 1858 gold rush people as far as hope, and it wrecked and sunk, and it's quite a tragic story. So I want to do a story about the Eliza Anderson because it sort of feels to me like a forgotten ship that was important in the early history. Uh, this is what these are sort of the things promotions that you had is fruit for personal use. So if you bought a lot of fruit, you had to get a sticker like this put on your box to show that you're getting it for personal use. You know, because otherwise you'd be a fruit liker. Oops, I think I missed a page there. I didn't. Okay. Uh, Population of Victoria, Vancouver Island in 1860. So you can see just sort of like how many people in Victoria Township, Victoria District, sort of like out to Oak Bay and that sort of thing. Lake District is part of what is Saanich now. Saanich itself indicates more the end of the island and the Nanaimo. So you can see total island was under 3,000 people, but not a single indigenous person was counted in that. So it was not like they're counting everybody, which is also okay. Why am I going? Am I done with them all here? Okay, I might be done with all of them. I don't know. Um, as I was saying, this is as in this one here was the shipment of gold dust um, from British Columbia in the from the Fraser River Gold Rush, and I calculated out this worked out to 81,000 ounces of gold, which sounds like a lot. But at the current day price in American dollars, this is only about $130 million worth of gold. So the Fraser River Gold Rush, which got global attention at the time, I don't think it moved that much gold. But yeah, so this I read through the Daily Colonist and find these things. This is one of the fruit blockades by the fruit police to stop people smuggling fruit. The whole fruit police were brought in by the conservative liberal coalition that was in power from 1940 to 1952. And this whole sort of, control of the market, control of everything, was ended in 1974 by the socialist Dave Barrett, which I always find a little bit interesting, who brought it in and who took it out. This is I also have this is a map showing what the boundary that Britain assumed was the United States was British possessions and not Americans. And you can see Orcas Island, Lopez Island, San Juan Island. The islands here, they're all considered to have been part British possessions. So it's interesting to see some of these maps. I'm big into maps. It's an early map. Okay, this another map from 1861, but ah, once again the fruit police. So this would be put in the newspapers throughout the interior for people to see, to basically, saying, don't steal don't be a fruit legger. Um, I have no idea what a standard unit is or standard package, and I'm sure I can find it out. But I just find it interesting they would take out these ads. Like, who would get a local paper, read it, and read a small, notice ad in it? But anyway, and interesting thing I found one day in the Daily Colonist, 1867. It's a little bit fuzzy. Uh, okay, so this was there. Is this the one that is? Oh yeah. So this is a to Mr. Joe Eden. George Wilson is basically put a newspaper ad in to challenge him to a boxing fight. And it just sort of, I found it sort of a rather curious thing to have in the newspaper. Um, this, is another early map of Victoria. Yeah, I know I'm tending to be on Victoria stuff. I happen to live in Victoria, and I happen to, done more on Victoria area. But in 1855, town is that's it. And if you go a little bit further, I happen to live right in these parts these days. There used to be a dairy farm around here. There was not much else, except for there's one thing here. It says the bridge. The indigenous people had constructed a bridge there, not the Europeans. The indigenous people had constructed a bridge long before the Europeans arrived. Um, and, ah, I will be having, yeah, yeah. The Great Vancouver Fire. I have stumbled across a public domain recording from 1966 of survivors from the Great Fire of 1886. And so I'm just right now trying to get enough images together, and I'm possibly getting one of my sons to see if he can draw me some from some really bad photos. And with this map here of the Great Fire, I'm hoping to put that together and hoping within a week or two to release that. But it's quite fascinating to listen. Like I'm going here, survivors of the fire. How can that be? It's 1966, and I'm going. That's 80 years ago. Oh yeah, if they're a teenager, they could still be alive. And it's just like I was alive in '66, barely, barely. But yeah, I was alive. It's a quite a fascinating story. So I hope to have that, say, 10 days, have it up. That's one of the next ones that I want to do. And it happens to be, it's when I get the public domain found film footage, it's fairly easy for me to do, and I can still do it with this computer. It's when I want to do the much more complex video editing, I need to get the new computer to do it. I'm going to do a few possible ones, basically sort of glorified PowerPoints with me narrating to them and a bit of music under behind them, but not the real sort of stuff that I want to do. But that'll come. That'll come. That hopefully will be by May. I'll be producing the original content in that form. So I am glad that you guys have found you. I'm glad there are some people watching this. Um, I'm also gonna with the live streams. One of the things I do want to do with the live streams and primarily use them for is I want to sit down and talk with authors, with academics, with people who have knowledge of the history of this province, and just have a chat with them. I did radio long enough that I can do, even though it doesn't sound like I'm very articulate at the moment. I'm out of practice, but I'm actually a very good radio interviewer, and did that for some years back in the Stone Age or somewhere thereabouts. So I'm fairly good at it, and I would figure about an hour-long interview, live streams with people, and I'm asking a number of people if they'll do it. So that's one of the reasons I'll do live streamings. Other ideas, I'm not sure. If you look in the description of this video, if you look down below there, there'll be a link to the Discord server, and I am happy to have lots of discussion on the Discord server. There is a Facebook page. I am beginning to loathe Facebook and having a page where they think they can make money off you. Oh God, it's a pain to deal with. So I'm much happier if people join me on the Discord. It's a much nicer place, and I'm happy to share stuff there. I'm happy to listen to ideas. Going to do channel memberships at some point, but I have got one piece of merch. I think it's online. I've designed a mug with that picture um, of the that drawing of the of the beaver wrecked at Stanley Park at Prospect Point. Um, I'm going to do a few more things like that, but you know, it's all getting there. Anyway, I'm glad that I can start getting to be doing these things. I have the time of my life. That that I can do it. I am enjoying it. I am realizing over and over again. Actually, what really inspired me to do this was um, to get back doing this is because at work a couple times I've taken people to um, the parliamentary library, the legislative library in Victoria, and it is as an astonishingly amazing part of the legislature. And I know the history of a lot of these things. Is people just I was shocked that I know these things. And so I was going, wow, yeah, people want to hear this, and maybe I should get back to doing this. Then, with a friend, I said to her, why don't you, field trips? There's no money for field trips, but if you can get your kids downtown, she had a class of grade 4 or 5 kids, we can do a field trip and we can go from the water where they can see the last remaining parts of the mooring docks that the Hudson's Bay Company, walk up, see the original well of the Hudson's Bay Company, see the outline of the fort with all their names on them, and then, telling them about this story and telling them about, when, back in 1840 or 1850, what would you have seen and why would you, and basically the questions. And it went really well and I really enjoyed it. and I've talked with other people about it. So I realized I want to start getting back to telling these stories. And so that field trip really inspired me because these are interesting stories. They're just not getting told enough. Anyway, I've babbled enough, I think. I thank you for joining me for this test. This test of the live stream system. If this had been a real live stream, I would have been much more organized. This is only a test of the live stream system. Anyway, thank you very much. I am going to call it there for a night. And once again, join the Discord server, and you can email me because my email is on the page there on my channel page and or the Discord server or the Facebook page, and I'll get back to you. I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in stories. So have a good evening. Bye all.